All right, so today I'm going to read a file in from my computer into my Java program and use the data. I'm going to put it in an array list of strings. If you look up the objective, that's basically what I just said. All right, so we have our project 13, FileReader. I have a package under my source folder, and I have an application class with a main method. What I don't have is a file to read, so let's do that. Let's go to our project level, right-click, New, File. I'm going to call it test.txt. There we go. And I just copied some mundane text and pasted it in there. Just make sure it's a couple lines so you have a good example. And I'll close this. So there's our test.txt. Alrighty. So let's see what we got. We have some steps. We're going to create a class called FileUtils. Let's go to our package, right-click, New, Class, FileUtils. There, we got a new class. See what's the next step. Create a method in FileUtils called readFile. Pass in the file name as a parameter, and the return type will be an array list of strings. All right, go back to FileUtils. I'm going to make it public because I want to call it from my application. And I got my array list. That's going to be my return type, an array list of strings. The file or the method name is going to be readFile. And we're going to pass in the file name. Whoops, file name. Oh my gosh, there we go. All right, Control-Shift-O to import our array list. And we need a return type. That's what this nasty red is right here. It says, hey, we need a return type. Let's go ahead and put a return type there. So you can put null in there. We're going to actually have to change that though. Let's see what we have for step 3. We're at step 3 now. In read file, read the data file and store each line as a string in an array list and return the data. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to return the data. It's going to be an array list of strings. We already guessed that because we had that there, right? Wouldn't do any good to return null. Null is nothing. So let's make an array list. Array list. And it's going to be of strings. I'm going to call it data. And we're going to instantiate it. Instantiate is just a fancy word for create. All right. So before we forget, we're actually going to return that data. There's no data in here now yet, right? We haven't done anything. Let's see, where are we at? Oh yeah, we still got to read it in. We're still on step 3. I was premature in checking. All right, so we're going to read a file in. We're going to use something called a file reader. Java's pretty cool like that. It's a little bit intuitive. So FR for file reader, new file reader. And I'm going to say file name. There we go. Control-Shift-O. What? This is still red. Look at that. So file reader is going to try and read a file, but what happens if the file is not there? We're going to try to read the file, and if it's not there, we're going to do something called catching the exception. So the exception is something that happens at runtime that's no good. It was an error at runtime. So we have this mechanism called, here we're going to use, we have these two quick fixes. So we can add throws to the declaration, or we can surround with a try catch. Let's do that. There we go. So we try to read the file. If we can't, we're going to catch the file not found exception. Then we're going to print out the stack trace. And that is sufficient, so I'm going to get rid of my comment. Cool. So file readers are cool. They'll read in the files byte by byte, but we really need to buffer those bytes so we can do stuff with it, like read in a line at a time. All right, so I'm going to say buffered reader. Call that BR, new buffered reader, and the file reader will be passed in. All right, Control-Shift-O. We imported a buffer reader up here, and let's go ahead and use it. Let's go ahead and see what we got. Let's say string line equals BR read line. Boy, that's convenient. Oh, it's red again. All right, so we're going to get another exception. What happens if the file is corrupt or something? We found it, but we can't read it for some reason. Well, that exception, the IO exception, is actually more general than the file not found exception. So we can replace this with an IO exception. It'll catch both of those. Do a Control-Shift-O and import that instead. Now we're good, although we're not doing anything with this line yet. The value of the local variable line is not used. Well, you know what? We don't just want one line anyway. We want a whole bunch of lines. We want all the lines. So we need a while loop. So while line does not equal null. We get to the end of the file, we're going to get a line back called null. Well, with a null value. All right, now we got our data. We're going to add a line. And then we're going to get a new line. Line equals BR read line. Sweet. Okay, now this looks good except for this yellow thing. Resource leak. BR is never closed. Well, it turns out closing resources in these try catches is a little bit clunky. So Java came up with a slightly less clunky way of making sure all the resources are closed. It is much safer. It implements an interface called Closeable or AutoCloseable. And basically, this is how you make AutoCloseable happen. Get rid of that curly bracket there. Make that a parenthesis. Just want one parenthesis here. And add another parenthesis there. Put a curly bracket here. Now, as Java 7 and Java 8 both implement this, anything past Java 7 implements this. It is on the Java certification exam. This is called Try with Resources. So these resources will be closed automatically. You don't have to worry about the close anymore. All right, so this looks good. We have our whole thing. I'm going to tighten this code up a little bit and get rid of some of these spaces. There we go. Leave a little bit of space just so you have some readability. And that's our file utils class with our read file. Let's go ahead and read our file. Let's go back to application. And we're going to instantiate. Step 4 says instantiate file utils. Create a file utils object from the class. File utils. And I'll just call it with a lowercase file for utils. New file utils. Alrighty. And we gotta get an ArrayList to read in to store our data, right? We can already read it in with the file utils read line. I'm just gonna call this my data. I'm gonna call it something slightly different. File utils read file. Perfect. And test.text. Right? Cool. This needs to be imported. Control-Shift-O. And now let's loop through the data. We know how to do that, right? For int I equals 0, I less than my data size, I plus plus. We'll do our sysout control space to get a print line. My data get, so we're going to get each element in the array list with the index I, since I is going to loop through. There we go. Looking good? Looking good? Let's try it. Let's go ahead and save everything. Right-click application, run as, Java application. Boom, there we go. We read our file in less than 10 minutes, even with me rambling on about it. What happens if this file is wrong? What happens when we can't find it? Let's do that. Run. Look at that. File not found exception. That was right here. We just printed that stack trace out. So now we have some information to go on if we have an accident, like if we can't find our file. Let's go back here and fix it. And we're good to go. Sweet. Alrighty. Hopefully you didn't have too much of a hard time with that. We're going to do writing files in the next video.